We mentioned yesterday the Gemara and the Chazal tell us the first person to age was Avraham Avinu. And the first time the word zikna, age, old age, is mentioned is this pasuk. Avram zoking bo bayomim. Avram was old, advanced in age. Hashem berach has Avram bakol. And Hashem blessed Avram with everything. He had everything. What would everything be? Everything. You'd say, we're thankful for many things. We're blessed for many things. Good children, a good wife, a good community, a good life, many things. She'd say things. Avram had many levels of accomplishment in his life. He had renown. He had wealth. He had victories. But he had one thing. It says bakol. What's the bakol? Berech Hashem bakol. Bakol oled b'gematria ben. Bakol is ben. Everything that he had, other than that, paled, meant nothing. We find the Avraham Ages makes a point. When HaKadosh Baruch said, "Lech lecha me'arscha v'avicha," leave your homeland, your birthplace, and your family, I will give you everything. And then the Torah tells us that after Lot separated from Avram, Hashem appears to him, and he says to Avram, "This land I will give to your progeny." And then the Torah tells Vayiven Avram Mizbeach, Lashem Anir Elov. Hashem built the Mizbeach to God who appeared to him. So Rashi says, why did he build the Mizbeach? Because he was informed that he was going to have the land, he was going to have children. That's Rashi. The Avraham Ages explains, says, Vayiven Mizbeach Lashem Anir Elov. Although he wanted that child, although the land is special, because as the Gemara tells us, you're outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's like you have no God. The Shechina, there's no archangel over Eretz Yisrael. But why did he build the Mizbeach? L'Hashem Nir Elov. To connote and commemorate that Hashem spoke to him. That was everything. But you were just told, you have no children. You have no land. You're a man without a land. Now you told you're going to have the land and you're going to have children. So Rashi says that's why he built the Mizbeach. Or Chaim Kodesh says, L'Hashem Anir Elov. Why did he build it? Because Hashem appeared to him to acknowledge that reality. Everything else paled to that. As special as it was. But regarding that, it's like nothing else existed but that. Hashem Berach Avram Bakol. What it said, he was blessed with a son. We're quantifying what is the son. That's everything. Everything else meant nothing. Why was that Ben so special? What does that say? If that's Bakol, why is that Bakol? Because he wanted to have just somebody to perpetuate himself, a father perpetuating a son. Why did Sari Menu and why did Avraham Avinu want a son? We had said the Maral cites a Medrash at the beginning of creation. It says after Hashem created the world, it says Bihi Baram, Bihi Baram, and when literally means when He created them. And the Medrash tells us Bihi Baram Osius Avraham. The letters of Bihi Baram, if you reconjugate them, it spells Avram, meaning Avram was the objective of the Bria. The Bria, the creation, has one purpose. B'Sril Torah, Shnikras Reishis, B'Sril Yisrael Shnikras Reishis. That's the only that's the only value in existence. That itself could only be facilitated, brought about, only if Avram has a child. The child will be his successor to carry that on, which ultimately will father Yaakov, who's going to have the Yud Beis Shvatim, the Shiftei Kol. So therefore, this is Bakol. This is everything. Bakol. We find that Yaakov, when he had fled to Lavan, What does he see? Lova, Rochel is a shepherdess, and she's coming with the flock of her father. And he sees her, and immediately he kisses her, and then he cries. He cries. So Rashi says, why did he cry? He cried for two reasons. Firstly, he immediately, when he saw her, that she wasn't going to be nichnas imo likvura, she was not going to be buried in the Mars Machpel together with him. He sensed that, knew it immediately. And since she is the primary matriarch, that would be considered an issue for him. In addition, since he had given up all his wealth to Eliphaz, because Eliphaz wanted to kill him, and he says, take all my wealth, and you learned under the tutelage of your father, Ani Choshev Kimes, so you actually fulfilled the dictate of your father to kill me, Ani Choshev Kimes. So why is he crying? Because he would have given her gifts, and he had no gifts to give her. You mean, he wanted to give you a fiance roses, for the pictures. Is that what we're talking about over here? He had no gifts to give her. What are gifts? And we discussed this the other day. When Eliezer finally locates Rivka and he realizes that she is going to be the future matriarch, he takes out 2 bracelets. Asorazob's mishkolam. They 10 weight in gold. That's the weight of the bracelets. Nezim, Zov, a nose ring. What's the value of these? So Rashi cites Chazal that since Rivki Menu is the matriarch, the 2 bracelets represented Shnei Luchas HaBris. The 2 bracelets, Asores of Mishkolam, 10 represents the Aser Sadibros. Meaning when he put those bracelets on her hand, being the matriarch, he's securing the Shnei Luchas HaBris. That's what he did, Eliezer. And he was instructed by Avram to do this. What is the Nezim? The Nezim Zov. That's the Machzah Shekel. To secure that, what's the value of Machzah Shekel? Communal offerings. The Korbanos were brought with the Machzah Shekel. The Mishkan was the Machzah Shekel, part of the Mishkan. What's the Korbanos? L'chaper al b'nei Yisrael. Without kapara, we can't survive. So that he had given her the Nezim, the nose ring, which represents the Machzah Shekel, and the Gemara tells us in Megillah that when Haman had given 10,000 bullion to seal the fate of the Jews, why was he not able to succeed? So the Gemara tells us in Megillah, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whenever he brings a makkah, whenever he brings a decree, there's always refuah called the makkah. The remedy is in place before the ailment comes about. Why? Because the schus of the Masa Shekel actually undermined and negated the value of that silver that he had given. So that's the value of Masa Shekel. Masa Shekel is kapora. It's the building of the Mishkan, which is also Migdosh Shchanti B'Socham. It's the location of the Shechina. Ultimately, it's going to nullify and negate the decree Lahashman Labid, Larug to annihilate the Jews. Yaakov understood if he would have had other pieces of jewelry, he could have given Rachel, who's the primary matriarch. It would have been beneficial for Klal Yisrael. What it is, I don't know what he would have accomplished. But he cried because he didn't have that to give, and because his value is patriarch. If his value is patriarch, he has that ability to set it in place, to set the dynamic for the future. That's why he cried. So what is the essence of these people? One thing. Kavod Shamayim. What the ultimate bring God's glory. That can only be brought through what? Through the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Nothing less than that. So to Avram, what was Bakol? It's not the wealth, it's not the fame, it's nothing else other than the son. Now that he has Yitzchok, and Yitzchok himself is qualified to be the patriarch. But if you have a patriarch, you need a matriarch. You have to have a woman who's able to be the Ezer Kenegdo at his level to facilitate and bring that about. Therefore, as a result of this, Avram elavdo. Zakam Beso. Avraham said to his slave, not a servant. Eved is a slave. He was his chattel. The elder of his household, Umoshe b'chol ashelo. He oversaw everything. Meaning, as I mentioned, the Gemara tells us he was called Damesek Eliezer. Why was called Damesek? It's an acronym. Dolo Mashka B'Torah Sosharabo. He drew from the wellsprings of his master. It says, Kol Masher Lomad Avram Limed Eliezer. All the Torah that Avram had learned, which Hashem communicated to Avram, he taught Eliezer. Eliezer was what? Was an adjunct. He would go out and disseminate Torah together with Avram. This is Eliezer. He was a holy man. The Medrash tells us that when Eliezer came to Lot, and Lot saw Eliezer, he thought he was looking at Avram Avinu. Meaning the radiance of Lot was, his level of holiness was, that radiance, he understood that was his uncle. That was Avram. Now he sees it again. And initially, you know what Lot wanted to do? When he saw Lot, when he saw Eliezer, he wanted to kill him. Could you imagine? He thought it was his uncle, and he wanted to kill him. So ultimately, we say, Arami Ovid Ovi, when Yaakov fled from after being there 20 years, and he wanted to kill Yaakov, and only because Hashem came to him in the dream, it says, just lay off. Do nothing to him. Initially, when he saw Avram, when he saw Eliezer, thought it was he wanted to kill him. So the Medrash says, Eliezer said an incantation, and he went up, and he was suspended. He couldn't reach him. When he saw he couldn't contend with him, then all of a sudden he starts behaving like a human being. This is Lot. This is, Lavan. This is Lavan's behavior. Okay? But what was the object? Because Lavan understood what does Avram represent? It represents everything which he's not. He's opposed to every aspect of Avram's existence and Yaakov's existence. And thinking that it was Avram, and this is his Pesua was alive. This is Rivka's brother. He wanted to kill him. Because we wanted to snuff it out. But to Avram, Hashem Be'ech Avram Bakol, everything. Yitzchak was everything. Everything else, the word pale doesn't even is not a correct word. It meant nothing. No, it's interesting. We say in the Krishma every day, if somebody says to you that either you worship the idol or you die, you have to give your life. If they say to you, eat this non-kosher food, eat this McDonald's burger, or we will confiscate all your wealth. You'll be homeless, you'll be penniless, you have nothing to eat. Or it's not pikuach nefesh. It's not pikuach nefesh. You'll be able to survive at the most minimal level. The halach is you have to give it all up. You have to give away everything you have. You're not permitted to violate a negative commandment. You have to give it all up. That's b'chol modecha. Your love for Hashem has to be at that level, b'chol modecha. Now the question is, if a person truly loves Hashem, is it painful? You know, for us, a devout Jew would do it. But does he feel now he's lacking because of that? He's pained. He has to do it because now he already visualizes what he's going to have to deal with. Living a life of what? Deprivation, poverty, and other terrible things. But you do it because that's what you're supposed to do. If Avram was confronted with that, would it mean anything? If you live your life that every aspect of your life is only kavod shamayim, so if the ultimate kavod shamayim is to give it up, you give it up. It's no different. Because even when you have it, it's only that. So when you give it up, what are you giving up? You're giving it up for the same reason why when you have it. But when we live our lives, even though we want to do the right thing, and whenever we can do kavod shamayim, we do it, but simultaneously we're living for ourselves. So therefore, for us to give it up, it's a tremendous challenge. Tremendous challenge. Rabbi Akiva, when he was being murdered, being literally butchered by the Romans, they scathed the flesh off his body. And his Talmidim were crying. And he says to his students, why are you crying? I've waited for this moment all my life. Here I have an opportunity to demonstrate my Ava, b'chol nafshecha. This is the ultimate. What exactly was he saying? Why were they crying, or why was Rabbi Akiva saying, this is the ultimate moment? Rabbi Akiva, one moment of his Torah, he was the leading Torah sage among the Tanoim. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says, who was Rabbi Akiva? Okahar mitochen zubezu. He was able to uproot mountains and grind them. That was his greatness in Torah. One moment of Rabbi Akiva's Torah is the equivalent of our whole generation's Torah in terms of his greatness. And he knew he taught Torah publicly, disseminated, and he knew he'd be put to death. Nevertheless, he did it. Why? Because that's called Kiddush Hashem. Kiddush Hashem is worth more than all his Torah combined. Because what's proof? Proof in the pudding is that you have to give your life. If your Torah is worth more than Kiddush Hashem, Hashem wouldn't say you have to give your life. Hashem's no, to sanctify my name, give it all up, even if it means the ultimate level of Torah. That's the obligation of Kiddush Hashem. So Reb Kiva himself, where was he at? Where were his Talmidim? Reb Kiva, who lived every aspect of his life, his Torah was all Kiddush Hashem. So now he's able to achieve the ultimate, that he was waiting for this moment, his Talmidim. They're bereft. Why? Because they're not going to have the Torah that he would give them. But if they would have internalized the reality that the value of the Torah is only Kiddush Hashem, they wouldn't have cried. This is the ultimate moment, that the Rebbe is going to bring about a level of Kiddush Hashem which surpasses all the Torah that Reb Kiva possessed, which he could have disseminated. That's Reb Kiva. Hashem Berach Avraham Bakol. This was it. Everything else meant nothing. As I said, the word paled is not a right word. It literally meant nothing. All that meant was Yitzchak. And they would have debates, theological debates. And Torah Shabbos understood, he himself was a pagan, he was a Roman, and he says to him, whose action is more perfect, man or God's? He's speaking to, he understands Reb Kiva believes in God. So Reb Kiva says, man's action is more perfect. He says, how's that possible? He says, could man create heaven and earth? He says, no, we're not talking about that. I mean, whatever is within the purview of man, man's accomplishment is greater. It's beyond the human being's ability to create. But within whatever he could do, his action is more perfect. That's what Reb Kiva says to Tonos Truppus. He says, I'll show you. I'll explain it to you. A kernel of wheat grows out of the ground. What do you take it? You harvest it. You thresh it. You take the kernel. You mill it. And you turn it into bread, into dough, and you bake it. What's more perfect? What's more perfected? Perfected. The final loaf of bread or the original kernel that comes out of the ground? See? God created an imperfect world, and it's the objective of man to perfect God's world. That's what it's all about. So Tonos Truppus says to Reb Kiva, he says, one thing I don't understand, you Jews, God creates you with a foreskin, and yet you go and you cut off the foreskin. I don't understand it. So the Avraham Ages explains, why didn't he get it? I mean, just gave him an example, the kernel with the loaf of bread. So Reb Kiva says to him, I just explained it to you. Man was created imperfect, and removing the foreskin is to perfect man. It's the exact same thing. So the Avraham goes to explain, why didn't he understand the equivalent, the loaf of bread, the kernel to the finished baked product, to the man, and having the foreskin removed? The answer is, he explains, because the loaf of bread, it's obvious. One is barely edible. Now you've brought it to the full level of edibility. The removal of those foreskin, what does it bring about? Why is man not perfect with the foreskin? Why is that a lack of perfection? You have to understand there's certain things which are beyond that we don't see. But it's part of a Masorah that when you remove that, it opens all aspects, all avenues of streams of spirituality, because the foreskin represents the Chet of Adam Rishon. The Gemara says in Shabbos, there's machlokes. Normally on Shabbos, Mekalka b'Shabbos is poter. Person does an act which is a destructive act among the Lamates Malachos. You're absolved. You're not liable. Why? Because all the Lamates Malachos are learned from the Mishkan, and the Mishkan, all creative activities were constructive. They weren't destructive. So if you do any of them in a destructive manner, there's no liability. That's the Gemara. So there's a discussion. What about chovel? What about if you go and you actually do an action that causes an injury? There's blood. There's blood. Mekalpa b'chabura, are you chayv or not? It's about Chalok Shimon and Reb Yehuda. Why? Because we have a Gzeres HaKosov that a child is born on Shabbos. A male child, he has to be circumcised on Shabbos. And it's a special Torah writes a posuk to indicate that afilu b'Shabbos. But if you hold Mekalpa b'chabura is poter, what do we need a pasuk to allow you to circumcise a child on Shabbos? So he says, you see from here that this is the exception. By all of the 39, it has to be constructive. When it comes to chabura, creating a wound, which is blood, even destructive. So the other one responds, says, no, you don't get it. It's not makalkel, it's makah b'patish. A Jew, when he's circumcised, you bring to a level of perfection. That's makah b'patish. That's perfection. That's not destructive. That's the ultimate constructive act. Okay, that's the Gemara. So God created man imperfect. He created Adam perfect. Adam messed up. He gave us a procedure which allows that perfection to be restored. What is that called? That's called Milah. On the eighth day, you circumcise the foreskin of his flesh. That's what you do. That's how you restore that level of perfection. Yes. In this whole portion, Eliezer is not mentioned by name. He summoned his slave, not a servant, his slave, his chattel. What was his qualification? His Kanbeso, the elder of his household. Moshem Chalashalo. He oversaw all his affairs. As I said, not only his material affairs, even his spiritual. He was a disseminator of what? Of what Avram taught him. He's Damesek. He was a holy man. So first he's identified, right? Yom Avram el Avdos Kambesa Amoshko Vashalo Simno Yotcho Tach Sirechi. He says, I want you to take an oath. What is Tach Sirechi under my thigh? What does that represent? What was the first mitzvah given to Avraham Avinu, which made the difference, was the life changer in his life? Mila, right? When he was 99, only then he was qualified to be able to father the patriarch. Before that, the reason why he wasn't able to have a child, he had Yishmael. But to be able to have the child from Rivka, from Sarah, which would be the future patriarch, he first had to be circumcised. So it's not only the first mitzvah. Rashi says, where is it? When you take a Torah oath, you usually hold the Sefer Torah, you hold tefillin. So here, he had to be associated with a mitzvah, go and Sefer Torah, tefillin, v'amilo ha'isa mitzvah rishona lo, ubaldo al-yidei tzar. And he came through pain. He was 99 years old. And why did he choose this? Because it was Chaviv Olav. I mean, Avraham Avinu wore tefillin. Avraham Avinu wore tzitzis. He could have taken a pair of tefillin. Avraham Avinu, I'm not sure what the parshas in his tefillin were, right? I'm not sure, right? All the stories, or in Sefer Torah, not quite sure. Evidently, he filled the mitzvah ksiva Sefer Torah. How did he fulfill ksiva Sefer Torah? It's a good question. In Sefer Torah, you have one letter missing. What, he had the story of Mitzrayim and all the challenges of love and everything? Definitely not, right? So what Sefer Torah did he have? You go with the Ramban in the introduction to Torah, maybe you could answer the question. What is, if you have one letter which is deleted in the Torah or added, and it doesn't belong there, what's the halacha? The law is, it's the Sefer is not valid. So the Ramban gives the example. Sometimes the word oso is written mole and choser. It's written deleted. So if you're supposed to have the vav there, it's not there. Okay, we understand why it's possible. What about if it's supposed to be choser? It's supposed to be deleted and you have an extra vav there. The vav, it's not supposed to be there. Say if there's puzzle. So the Ramban asks, why is it puzzle? Right? There's no way you're going to read this incorrectly, even without the vowels. The aleph vav tav vav is what? That's oso. So why is it puzzle? That's the Ramban. So Ramban answers that what are the letters of the Sefer Torah? Letters of Sefer Kul Shem Shalom Kodesh Baruch Hu. It's the names of Hashem. He has various names, 72 letter names, 42 letter names, all kinds of names. From the first letter to the last letter of the Torah, they're all part of Hashem's names. And the bedrock of the Kedusha of the Sefer Torah, Shem is Hashem, except Hashem conjugated letters that the narrative, as it reads what we have in our Torah. That's the Nigla. That's the revealed Torah. But the underpinning of the Torah, Hashem is Hashem. So Avraham, seemingly, he had all the Shem is Hashem in his Torah, from Bereshis till the end. The narrative didn't read, because Hashem didn't conjugate the letters yet. But every letter that comprises the Sefer Torah, Avraham had. I'm just saying this right now. That's the Sefer Torah that Avraham had. That's how we fill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. Okay? Now, the other thing I wanted to say was, there's a famous Rosh in the Halachos Ketanos and Menachos. There's a mitzvah, I said, 613th mitzvah is that every male Jew has to have a Sefer Torah, either written or you have to buy it. Most Jews do not fill the mitzvah. So how do we contend with this issue? So the Rosh says that if you own Svarim, and the Svarim themselves contain Torah Sheba'al Peh, you fill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah by even purchasing. So you have a Rambam, set a Rambam, you fill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. Because even if you purchase Sefer Torah, you don't have to necessarily write it, you fill the mitzvah. You have a Shas, which is the Torah in its entirety. You fill the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. So Avraham, he had a Shas. The Gemara Avodah Zarah says that Avram's Mesechus Avodas Kochavim had 400 chapters. Could you imagine? 400 chapters in this Mesechus Avodas Kochavim. Can you imagine what kind of library you'd need? You'd have to have a whole house just to store such a Shas. Because every nuance of Avodah Zarah, every application was in his Shas, in his Mesechus Avodah Zarah. Okay? So Rashi says, why did he choose Milah? Because it was Borlo B'tzar. And therefore it was Chaviva Agav. Therefore it was special to him. I mean, I would have said, the only mitzvahs I say that is Mitzvah V'oseh, right? You say, God la Mitzvah V'oseh, Yosef B'Shein Mitzvah V'oseh. Greater is a mitzvah that you're commanded to fulfill than the mitzvah that you're not obligated to fulfill. Every Noahide law, Avram was a ben Noach. Every Noahide law, we always point out, is a negative commandment. The Shem mitzvahs in Noach are losasa. So if you're supposed to take an object of mitzvah, what could he take? If it's tefillin, ein mitzvah v'oseh. Even his safety, ein mitzvah v'oseh. The only mitzvah which is mitzvah v'oseh is Milah, right? That's why it should be Chaviv Olav. Because there's nothing at that level. But Rashi says that's not the reason. Because it was Bo'aloy, the Tsar. That's why it's Chaviv Olav. Right? I mean, what Rashi say more simple, as we just explained. It's the only mitzvah which was what? Which was mitzvah v'oseh. You hear the question?
Over again, Rabbi, say the question over.
Second. At the beginning of Parshas Dvorim, where it's the last 36 days of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, and he's reviewing the Torah, and he opens with words of chastisement, rebuking them for what happened over the past 40 years. Initially, when Yisro had said to Moshe, if you adjudicate all the cases yourself, you're going to wither. and we should set up a judicial system. What happened? The Jews jumped at it. They said, this is terrific. So Moshe says, why are you so excited to accept it? Because me, you know who I am. And me, you know you can't bribe. But you know, the other judges, somehow you could have some level of influence. And he says, secondly, I want to ask you a question. I learned Torah ayidei tsar. When Moshe learned Torah from Hashem 40 days, 40 nights, it says, Lechem lo achalti ma'ad lo shasisi. Is it better to learn from someone who acquired Torah through tsar or a person who acquired Torah not through tsar? Moshe Rabbeinu is not saying because my Rebbe was Hashem and your Rebbe was immortal. That's not what he says. You cannot compare a person who came upon Torah through tsar to a person who did not come upon Torah through tsar. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu says. Something that's through tsar, it's another dimension. It creates another connection to God. That's what Moshe is saying. Because the context I studied Torah was Lechem lo achalti ma'am lo shasisi. So as great as I am and what I am, it doesn't compare because you're not in that state of deprivation as I was, in pain. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu says to them. That's the rebuke. It was chaviv olav because it came b'tzar. The tsar is such a valuable part. It surpasses the mitzvah osa. It's beyond it. It's not tefillin versus milah because one is mitzvah. Here it's b'tzar. Once it's b'tzar, it's another dimension. That's the connector. When you experience something b'tzar, you connect it at that ultimate level. As Moshe Rabbeinu was able to absorb the Torah and internalize it because it was b'tzar.
Rabbi.
Famous Officer Reb Nosson, that if you do a mitzvah, b'tzar or not b'tzar, the value of doing a mitzvah b'tzar is 100-fold of doing a mitzvah not b'tzar. But it's b'tzar. It's the concept of fum tzara agra. The greater the pain or the difficulty, and despite that you do it, it's 100 times it's the fold of a mitzvah that comes easy to you. So that's the main point here. The mitzvah Milo came b'tzaviv was chaviv olav, because this was the real connector at that ultimate level.